What if your biggest blockage to a better, a happier, a healthier, and even more successful life is actually unhealed childhood trauma? The fascinating thing here is that this tends to be the case for a lot of people. Why? Because what it is that they learned in childhood through the trauma were behavioral patterns that were actually unhealthy and ended up creating a life for them that had them stuck in specific ways of living that they learned back then that were outdated. And not only that, but also paired with that, a stagnated sense of emotional immaturity some point in childhood, even as early as infancy. Now imagine an infant or a child trying to operate life over the long term in adulthood. Doesn't function properly. It's not healthy. Now the challenge here is, and this is totally understandable, there's no shame or guilt or anything. None of that. But the challenge here is that in regards to resolving unhealed childhood trauma is the act of actually looking at it, looking at yourself. This is something that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people, understandably so, especially considering that some people actually learned to believe that they need to attain as a person this ideal of perfection that doesn't actually exist. So, what does that mean for them? Well, if they were to look at themselves and to recognize the exact opposite of the idea of perfection, which is imperfection, if they were to recognize that they are, in fact, a imperfect human, which everybody is, that would also entail difficult emotions to face. Shame, maybe. Oh, shame on you that you're not perfect. You're supposed to be perfect. Why are you not perfect? Yeah, that can be difficult for people to face. So imagine that your life could actually drastically, night and day, transform completely if you were to look at your childhood trauma. If you were to realize that the reason that your life sucks, if it does, is actually rooted in what happened to you in childhood. It's not your fault that you were traumatized at all. It's not. But it is your responsibility. If you so choose, you absolutely don't have to. You have free human agency. It is your responsibility to do something about it. And the fascinating thing is that while it is probably difficult to look at yourself, maybe it takes bravery, maybe it takes courage. If it is actually difficult to look at yourself, which I would argue that it is, what you might come to find 10 plus years down the line of actually doing the work in a professional setting with a licensed professional that knows what they're doing, you might actually realize how much you open yourself up to the potential of who you actually are underneath all of your childhood trauma. I made a video yesterday, I believe it was yesterday's video. And in the video, I was talking about how trauma kind of layers any given individual in confusion. Because when you are raised, now don't get me wrong, every child comes out of childhood with some level of trauma, some marring and scathing, whether severe or less severe. It's not a matter of comparison, it's not a matter of more or less. It's just a matter that some people had far more severe childhood trauma than others. Some people were raised in survival, where they learned fight, flight, freeze, fawn. They learned to wear masks, to get love, validation, approval. They learned to literally become somebody else. So they layered themselves throughout all these years with all these different defense mechanisms that actually distracted them from their true nature. People that were raised in environments of survival, where they literally had to become somebody else to survive, they have a lot of undressing to do, if they so choose to, of course. It's not their fault that they were traumatized, but I would argue that it's their responsibility to do something about it, especially if they want a better life for themselves. So I want to explore a few things that I think are very important to understand here. Is it uncomfortable to knock on the door of your childhood trauma and do something about it? Yeah, it's kind of like how, imagine a structure that you don't know is fucked up until you look at it and you realize that the foundation is filled with cracks. It's filled with infestations of stuff that you didn't even see there. A structure that you previously thought was totally fine. Oh, wow, it's actually not. Wow, it actually was that bad. Holy shit, I was gaslighted. Holy shit, I was blinded from myself and led to believe that I was something that I wasn't. Yeah, that's difficult. That's difficult shit to face. It can be uncomfortable for you to step into a reality that is not only unknown and unfamiliar, but also to then have everything that you previously thought to believe was true. It's like a culture shock. It's like all of a sudden you awaken and you're like, oh wow, I thought that I wasn't capable. And it's beautiful to realize that when you start to undress everything that you learned to be true about yourself, all these limitations, it's beautiful to realize, holy shit, it was wrong. I'm not a worthless piece of shit. I am not incapable of doing certain things. I was just gaslighted. I was led to believe that I'm not capable. I was led to believe all of these things that are just not true about me. All of these different reinforcements, all of these people that I've had in my life, all these people that have used me and taken advantage of me. Yeah, I'm going to say goodbye to them now. And so it's fascinating because some people, as what I would argue to be a defense mechanism, look at the potential of doing work on themselves. And again, as a defense mechanism, they just look at the whole thing and they're like, hey, come on, I came out just fine. Yeah, no, you didn't. And again, every child comes out of childhood with some level of trauma. That's the reality of it. But to have a whole bunch of fucked up behavioral patterns and to not even have the humility to, like, just like, oh shit, that is fucked up. When you look at yourself, to instead, like, I don't know, gaslight yourself and be like, okay, I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not going to touch it, and I'm going to do everything that I can to avoid it. Because it's uncomfortable. And there's pain there, and I don't want to face that pain. I get it. I get it. You can do that if you want to. But the reality of the matter, and let me make this very clear because this needs to be understood. When people are traumatized in childhood, they're usually emotionally stagnated there, which means that they usually end up being a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old, however old they get, without doing any work on themselves. They usually end up at that age with the same fucking emotional immaturity as from when they were stagnated in childhood. So imagine a 70-year-old man who appears, people are really good with appearances, who appears to have all of his shit together, to be perfect. I don't know, any of these labels that people come up with. Yet he's got the emotional maturity of somewhere between I don't know, a 3 and a 6-year-old little boy. So he might appear to have all of his shit together, have all of his stuff, and like, clothing, real estate, finances, all of these different standings can really blind people from the reality of some people. Like, you could look at somebody who actually has the emotional maturity of a little boy, but is like dressed in stuff that makes you believe that this person just has all of their shit figured out. Or, I mean, yeah, that's really what it is. So imagine that. Like, imagine you see somebody that looks like they've got it all taken care of and all figured out. Meanwhile, I don't know. Say for instance, they've got the attire going, they've got the house, they've got the car, they've got the money, they've got the job, they've got everything. Meanwhile, they also simultaneously have explosive anger. They've got an unstable personality. In fact, they actually hardly have any personality at all. But all of their other accolades are utilized as a distraction from who the fuck they are as a fucked up individual, because they had a fucked up childhood and they were too scared to look at it and they didn't do anything about it. And so, it's fascinating because I get it. It can be really uncomfortable to, open up, I guess, Pandora's box metaphorically, right? Or to just like go down that rabbit hole and figure out what the fuck happened to you in childhood. It can be really uncomfortable to take that route, you know. But the reality is that if you never look at yourself, the likelihood that your life is going to get better is not very high. And not only that, but if you never actually do the work to emotionally mature beyond that point in childhood of which you were stagnated, you're just going to stay there. Like, if you never do the work to actually get emotionally regulated, to actually acquire a regulated nervous system, you're just going to stay emotionally dysregulated. It's going to fuck up, if not all, a majority of the areas of your life, especially relationships. I mean, relationships are everything. Relationships to people, relationships to your job, relationships to food and, other substances and stuff. It doesn't matter what it is. If you lack emotional if you lack necessary healthy emotional boundaries, shit, your life is going to be a tornado. Your life is going to be absolutely awful. And I've seen it. I've seen these kinds of things. I'm not saying in my own life, but I've observed other people's lives. Wow. You can absolutely go throughout your entire life while completely avoiding the work, while completely avoiding looking at your childhood, that can actually show you your toxic patterns that lead to severe unhappiness in your own life and the lives of others, because you have relationships with other people, unless you're completely cut off from the world, which is also exceedingly unhealthy. Understanding why your patterns ever started, understanding why your behaviors ever started, understanding why you've been the way that you've been. Childhood. You don't have to look at it. You don't. You can go throughout the rest of your entire life just doing the same fucking thing you have been. But how much your life will transform for the better, for the happier, for the healthier, for the more successful, out of this fucking world. But you get to make that choice. You don't have to. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just not healthy. And it is the difference between a happier life and an unhappier life. It's entirely up to you.